Your money is being spent right now while you read this at roughly $1 billion a day on a war that Congress never voted for, that the Constitution doesn't authorize, and that nobody in Washington can tell you how it ends. On February 28, 26, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated assault on Iran that killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei on day one, fired on over 1,000 targets across the country, and within 48 hours triggered the single largest disruption to the global oil supply in the entire history of the modern energy market. The Pentagon told Congress the operation cost $11.30 billion in the first 6 days alone. Think about that number for a second. $11.3 billion in 6 days. Congressional sources told reporters the war was burning through close to $1 billion a day. And Politico reported that Republicans on Capitol Hill privately feared the number was closer to $2 billion daily. Based on estimates from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the total cost of this war has likely already surpassed $20 billion and is on track to exceed $25 billion by the end of this week. And now the Pentagon is asking Congress for an additional $200 billion on top of a defense budget that is already approaching $1 trillion annually. Trump, when asked why he needed the money, told reporters it's always nice to have. That is the answer you got. That is what your government told you. Now, let's talk about who is actually paying this bill and what it is costing you beyond the numbers on a government spreadsheet. The first thing you have to understand is the sheer mechanical scale of what is being spent here. Operating a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber costs nearly $150,000 per flight hour, not including the cost of the weapons it carries. Every single interceptor missile being fired to knock Iranian drones out of the sky costs millions of dollars per shot, and the United States has been firing them by the hundreds. Defense analyst Jennifer Cavanagh of Defense Priorities estimated the U.S. easily spent more than $10 billion on air defense systems in the first 48 hours alone, while Iran launched over 2,000 drones and 500 ballistic missiles. The cost ratio between an American interceptor and an Iranian drone is roughly 106 to 1. That means for every cheap Iranian drone that gets shot down, the United States is spending roughly 100 times more to destroy it. This is not a sustainable equation. In the first 12 days of this war, the U.S. expended up to 30% of its entire THAAD stockpile and 80 SM-3 interceptors. There have been no new THAAD interceptor deliveries since August 2023, and deliveries are not set to resume until April 2027. At the rate these weapons are being consumed, the entire U.S. interceptor stockpile could be exhausted in 4 to 5 weeks. 4 to 5 weeks. That is not a military statistic buried in a think tank report. That is a national security catastrophe in slow motion. And it is happening right now while most Americans are focused on gas prices at the pump. Speaking of gas prices, let's talk about what this war is doing to the American economy in real time, because the direct military spending is only the beginning of the financial bleeding. The 2026 Iran war, including the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, has been described by the International Energy Agency as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which approximately 20% of the world's daily oil supply moves, within hours of the first U.S. strikes. Brent crude oil prices surged past $100 per barrel on March 8th for the first time in 4 years, reaching a peak of $126 per barrel. The national average for gasoline jumped nearly 27 cents in a single week, the fastest weekly increase since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. On highway, diesel prices rose from $3.77 per gallon on February 27th to $5.45 per gallon by April 1st, a 45% increase. And gas prices in Los Angeles have hit more than $6 a gallon. Amazon has added a fuel surcharge to its deliveries. Mortgage rates have climbed to their highest level in 7 months. This is not abstract. This is your grocery bill, your commute, your monthly payment. Every working family in this country is subsidizing this war, not just through taxes, but through the price of every single thing they buy. The Penn-Wharton budget model estimated the war could carry a direct cost of between $40 billion and $95 billion to taxpayers, with total economic impact potentially reaching $210 billion. The cost of Iraq ended up near $3 trillion. And we started that one with the same confident talk about a short, decisive operation with clear goals. What are the goals here? In his first primetime address to the nation on the war, Trump did not articulate a specific endgame. did not clarify whether he planned to send in ground troops, and offered no new signs of diplomatic progress. He told allies to go reopen the Strait of Hormuz themselves, saying the hard part is done, so it should be easy. That was Trump's message to the world. You figure it out. Meanwhile, the strait remains closed, oil prices remain elevated, and the war continues with no defined exit. The war against Iran is widely unpopular, with over 60% of Americans disapproving of it. Now, here is the part that should make your blood boil, because this is where the money trail gets personal. The Pentagon is asking Congress for $200 billion to keep funding this war. Congress has to find that money somewhere. And rather than putting it on the national credit card, which is already carrying over $39 trillion in debt, with interest payments exceeding $2 billion per day, some Republicans are talking about cutting health care to pay for bombs. House Budget Chair Jode Arrington floated the possibility of adding the additional defense spending to an upcoming reconciliation bill and offsetting it through cuts to state and social programs. The big, beautiful bill that Republicans passed last year already cut over $1 trillion from Medicaid and healthcare spending and is expected to cost millions their health insurance. And now they want to go back for more. Senator Elizabeth Warren summed it up in 20 words. Republicans in Congress want to cut Americans' health care to pay for more war in Iran. Let that sink in. And she is right. A Gallup poll found that 61% of Americans are worried a great deal about the availability and affordability of health care, more than any other issue, more than the economy, more than inflation. The single most pressing concern of the American people. And the answer from Washington is that we need to cut it to fund an unauthorized war of choice in the Middle East. Let's be honest about what we're watching here. The United States launched military operations in Iran on February 28, 2026, without congressional authorization. Congress has not authorized these operations. There was no declaration of war. There was no meaningful debate. One man with access to the most powerful military on earth decided to start it, and now the entire country is living with the consequences. On the campaign trail, J.D. Vance himself said, "Our interest, I think, very much is in not going to war with Iran. It would be a huge distraction of resources. It would be massively expensive to our country." That quote is from 2024. Vance is now vice president of a country spending $2 billion a day bombing Iran. This is not hypocrisy in the abstract. This is a deliberate reversal of promises made to working class Americans who were told they were voting for peace and fiscal sanity. They got the opposite. As of April 4th, 2026, 15 American service members have been killed in this war, and more than 300 have been wounded. Iran has lost more than 3,500 people killed, including over 200 children. In Lebanon, over 1,300 have died. The Houthis have re-entered the conflict. This war has already grown beyond Iran. It has pulled in Lebanon, the Gulf states, the Houthis, and the global energy market. The war has caused a systemic collapse of the Gulf Cooperation Council economic model, with Arab states of the Persian Gulf facing a grocery supply emergency, food import disruptions affecting 70% of the region's caloric intake by mid-March, and a 40 to 120% spike in consumer prices. Desalination plants, the source of 99% of drinking water in Kuwait and Qatar, have been struck. This is what modern warfare looks like. It is not surgical, it is not clean, it is not contained, and the United States launched it. The question this video is asking, who pays the bill, has more than one answer. The most obvious answer is American taxpayers. The first $12 billion spent on this war could have funded the entire National Park Service for more than 3 years, provided a full year of child care for roughly 900,000 children, or paid the annual salaries of roughly 166,000 teachers. The $200 billion supplemental request could cover ACA healthcare subsidies for nearly 6 years for millions of Americans, or could be used to purchase and cancel all medical debt in the United States. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are real choices that real governments make. And this government chose bombs over doctors, chose interceptor missiles over school lunches, chose Operation Epic Fury over the people who elected them. But the bill is also being paid by people who never voted in an American election. Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that more than 600 schools and education centers have been hit since the start of the war. At least 3,000 people have been killed across the region since the war began, and the United Nations Refugee Agency says more than 3.2 million people have been displaced inside Iran. These are human beings, these are families, and every one of those deaths was paid for in part by the American taxpayer. That is not an anti-American statement. It is a statement about accountability and about what empire actually costs when you look at the full ledger, not just the Pentagon's carefully curated briefings to Congress. The national debt now stands at more than $39 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office estimates it will exceed $52 trillion by 2035. Interest payments on that debt already exceed $2 billion per day. We are a country paying $2 billion a day just in interest on money we have already borrowed, while simultaneously spending another $2 billion a day on a new war, while cutting health care for working people. This is not a sustainable trajectory. This is a country eating itself. And the people who are making these decisions are not the ones who will suffer the consequences. The politicians will have their government health care. The defense contractors will have their record profits. Senator Rand Paul, one of the few voices in the Republican Party willing to say plainly what needs to be said. Put it this way, I think the biggest threat to our national security is not Iran. I think it's our national debt. And even Rand Paul, whatever his other positions, is right about that one. Oil industry executives and analysts have warned that the Strait of Hormuz needs to be reopened by mid-April, or the economic fallout from this war will escalate sharply. They warned that even if the war ends soon, enough damage has already been done to keep energy prices elevated for an extended period. The conflict has echoed the 1970s energy crisis through acute supply shortages, currency volatility, inflation, and heightened risks of stagflation and recession. The last time the United States faced something like this, it took years to recover. And that crisis was not caused by a war America started. This one was. There is something deeply revealing about this moment in American history. The same government that told you there was no money for expanded health care, no money to keep school lunch programs running for children, no money to extend ACA subsidies that were keeping millions of working families insured, that same government found nearly $40 billion in a matter of weeks. The moment the order was given to go to war, the money was always there. The question was always about priorities, and what this war has done in the most brutally transparent way imaginable is show you exactly what this system's priorities are. They are not you. They are not your children, your healthcare, your mortgage, your gas bill. The priorities of this system are power projection, regime change, and the perpetuation of a military machine so vast and so expensive that it has become the single largest line item in the federal budget of the most indebted nation on earth. Representative Thomas Massie asked the question that every American should be demanding an answer to. It begs the question, how long do they plan to be there? What are the goals? Is this the first $200 billion? Does this turn into $1 trillion? Nobody in the administration has answered that question. Nobody has given you a definition of victory. Nobody has drawn a map showing you what the end of this looks like, because the people running this war are not thinking about the end. They are thinking about the next weapons contract, the next strike package, the next press conference where they can stand in front of a flag and sound resolute. And you are paying for all of it. Every dollar, every day, with no vote, no debate, and no plan for how it stops.